Go home, Julia. Dad needs to see the future, his grandson, not a withered branch like you. My sister Annie whispered those words as she blocked the ICU door with her pregnant belly, refusing to let me say goodbye to our dying father. But through the glass, I saw the real reason she wanted me out. She guided his trembling hand to sign a document. It wasn't a farewell note. It was a power of attorney. She wasn't holding his hand to comfort him. She was stealing his signature. My name is Julia, 32 years old, and as a high school history teacher, I spend my life documenting the past so it can't be rewritten by liars. But sitting at my father's dining table 2 weeks before he died, I let them lie. The air in the room was thick with the smell of expensive roast beef and cheap cologne. Galvin, my sister's husband, swirled his wine glass like he was auditioning for a movie about Wall Street. He leaned across the table, his eyes glazed with the arrogance of a man who has never actually earned a dollar he didn't borrow. You really need to think about upgrading, Julia, he said, gesturing with his fork. I mean, teaching history is cute and all. It's noble work. But let's be real. It's a dead end. You're capping your potential at what? 50 grand a year? That's my lunch budget. Annie laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a sharp, barking sound. She rubbed her pregnant belly like she was polishing a trophy. Don't be mean, Galvin. Someone has to babysit the next generation. Besides, Julia doesn't have our ambition. She likes her little books and her quiet life. Not everyone is built for empire building like us. I gripped my napkin under the table until my knuckles turned white. My father was already too sick to eat, slumping in his chair at the head of the table, his eyes clouding over. He looked between us, confused, trying to find the peace he had always begged for. I'm happy with my life, I said, my voice steady. My bills are paid. My conscience is clear. Conscience doesn't buy waterfront property, Galvin sneered. We're closing on a commercial complex next month. Huge returns. We're doing this for the family legacy. For the boy, he pointed at Annie's stomach. That kid is going to grow up in a castle, not a classroom. Aunt Mary, who was sitting next to me, patted my hand. Her touch felt cold. Now, Julia, don't look so sour. You should be proud of them. They are building a future. You have your independence. But Annie is giving your father a grandson. That's the real legacy. You need to be more supportive. Don't be jealous just because your life turned out smaller. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the roast beef against the wall. I wanted to tell them I knew Galvin was already $50,000 in debt to a probate advance company, betting on Dad's death to pay it back. I knew because I researched things. It's my job, but I swallowed the anger. Mark, my fiancé, shifted in his chair next to me. He is a financial lawyer, a man who destroys fraud for a living. He had been silent the whole meal, watching them with the cold precision of a predator observing prey. He leaned in close to my ear, his voice a low rumble that only I could hear. Look at them, he whispered. This is the Dunning-Kruger effect in the flesh. They are so stupid they think they're geniuses. They think they're sharks because they smell blood in the water. But they don't realize they are swimming in a tank, and we are the ones holding the plug. Let them brag, Julia. Their arrogance is the only weapon we need. They will sign anything we put in front of them because they think they're too smart to be tricked. I looked back at Galvin, who was now lecturing Dad about asset liquidation. I looked at Annie, smirking over her wine glass. Mark was right. They weren't powerful. They were blind, and I was done trying to open their eyes. I was going to let them walk right off the cliff. Back at the hospital, the air in the ICU was stale, recycled, and heavy with the scent of antiseptic. The machines beeping next to my father's bed were the only things keeping time. Annie checked her watch, then patted her belly with a theatrical sigh. My ankles are swelling, she announced, not looking at Dad, but at her reflection in the darkened window. I booked a prenatal massage downstairs. I'll be back in an hour. Don't touch anything, Julia. And don't upset him. She grabbed her purse and waddled out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in her wake. The moment the elevator doors dinged shut, the dynamic in the room shifted. I didn't sit by the bed and weep. I pulled out my phone and texted Mark. Now. Mark walked in 30 seconds later, followed by a woman in a gray suit, a notary public. We moved with the efficiency of a pit crew. There were no tears, no long goodbyes. We had a job to do. Mark pulled a single document from his briefcase. It wasn't a new will. Contesting a will takes years and costs a fortune. This was a revocation of power of attorney. Jonathan, Mark said, leaning close to my father's ear. His voice was gentle but firm. This document cancels Annie's authority to access your accounts. It stops her from selling the house. Do you understand? Dad's eyes, usually clouded with morphine, cleared for a second. He looked at the door where Annie had just left, then at me. He gave a small, weak nod. Mark placed the pen in his hand. It took Dad a long time to sign. The line was shaky, barely legible, but it was there. The notary stamped it. The seal crunched into the paper, the sound of a lock snapping shut. Then, Dad grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, fueled by terminal desperation. He pulled me down until my ear was inches from his lips. "Don't let them," he wheezed, each breath a struggle. "Don't let them take the house. It's for you." I pulled my phone out and hit record on the voice memo app. "Say it again, Dad. The house," he whispered, his voice rasping on the recording. "For Julia. Keep them out." "I promise," I said. I kissed his forehead. His skin was paper-thin and cold. The notary left. Mark took the signed revocation to file it immediately with the county clerk. I sat back in the hard plastic chair, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. 10 minutes later, Annie returned, looking flushed and relaxed. She dropped her bag on the chair and immediately pulled out her phone, logging into her banking app. I watched her thumb hover over the transfer button. A normal sister would have screamed. A normal sister would have shouted, "Stop. I revoked your power." I almost did. The urge to save the money, to stop the theft right there, was instinctual, but Mark's advice replayed in my mind. Cold and logical. If I stop her now, it's a family dispute. It's a civil matter. We argue in probate court for 5 years while she drains the accounts on legal fees. But if I let her press that button, if I let her use a power of attorney that she doesn't know is void, that is bank fraud. That is a felony. I am not protecting the assets anymore. I am building a prison cell. I watched her tap the screen. A small smile played on her lips. She thought she was securing her future. I stayed silent, smoothing the blanket over Dad's legs, and let her dig her own grave. Most people wait a week to bury their dead. Annie buried Dad under a layer of blue confetti in 48 hours. She didn't call it a funeral. She called it a legacy celebration and gender reveal. The historic Victorian house my father had spent 30 years restoring, sanding the banisters by hand, painting the crown molding, was now draped in tacky "It's a Boy" banners. I stood in the corner of the living room, watching the circus. A catering crew from the most expensive firm in the city was setting up a raw bar. Oysters, shrimp, crab claws. Galvin was directing them, pointing at Dad's antique mahogany sideboard like he owned it. "Careful with the ice," he snapped at a server. "That wood is imported." He didn't know what kind of wood it was. He just knew it looked expensive. I watched Annie sign the invoice for the catering. She pulled a card from her purse, a heavy, black American Express. Dad's card, the one that was legally frozen the moment his heart stopped. She swiped it on the caterer's tablet. Beep. Approved. She didn't just buy shrimp. She just committed identity theft and credit card fraud in front of 50 witnesses. I took a sip of my water and let the transaction go through. Every swipe was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. Annie tapped a spoon against a champagne flute. The sound cut through the chatter. She stood on the grand staircase, one hand on her belly, the other holding a microphone. She looked radiant, the grieving daughter playing the role of the matriarch. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice catching with a practiced sob. "I know it's soon. But Dad, he loved life. He wouldn't want us to mourn in black. He would want us to celebrate the future." She rubbed her stomach. "He told me, right before the end, that his only regret was not seeing his grandson run through these halls. He made me promise that this house would be a home for his legacy. A lie. A bold, disgusting lie spoken over the spot where his coffin should have been." The guests murmured sympathetically. Aunt Mary wiped a tear, nodding vigorously. "So today," Annie continued, her voice hardening, "we honor that wish. This house is no longer a museum of the past. It is the future home of the next generation." Blue cannons fired. Confetti rained down, coating the hardwood floors in a layer of plastic scrap. The room erupted in applause. Annie beamed, basking in the adoration. Then her eyes found me. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It stopped at her mouth. Sharp and cold. She walked over, stepping over the mess she had created. "Julia," she said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "You're just standing there. Since you're not contributing to the family legacy, maybe you can make yourself useful? The cleaning crew isn't coming until tomorrow, and we can't have people walking on this trash." She kicked a pile of blue paper toward my feet. "Clean it up," she whispered, leaning in. "You're good with messes. It's the only thing you're qualified for." I looked at the broom in the corner. I looked at her smirk. I picked up the broom. Not because I was submissive, but because the longer I stayed, the more I saw. I swept my way toward the hallway, near the library. The door was cracked open. Galvin was inside, pacing. He wasn't celebrating. He was sweating. He held his phone to his ear with a white-knuckled grip. "I know the terms," he hissed into the phone. "The payout is coming. The old man is dead. We just need the probate to clear. No, don't call my wife. You'll get your money plus the interest. Just give me 2 weeks." I stopped sweeping. Probate advance. He had borrowed money against an inheritance he didn't have yet. He had leveraged assets that weren't his. He was already drowning. And he was using Dad's ghost as a life raft. I walked back into the party. The dustpan full of blue lies. I dumped the trash in the bin. Let them party. Let them eat the oysters bought with stolen credit. The bill was coming due, and the interest rate was going to be catastrophic. The funeral reception was held 3 days later. The house still smelled like stale champagne and old lilies from the gender reveal, but at least the confetti was gone. I stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. The mood was somber, but the undercurrent of tension was electric. Everyone knew about the will reading scheduled for tomorrow. Everyone knew Annie expected to take it all. Mark stood near the entryway, his phone pressed to his ear. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap was set. He had left his vintage leather briefcase on the hall table, the brass zipper snagged open just an inch. It looked like a careless mistake, a busy lawyer distracted by a client call. But nothing Mark did was careless. Inside that bag, nestled between legitimate tax forms, was a manila folder stamped in red ink. Confidential. Cayman Trust. Jonathan. I watched Annie. She was holding court in the living room, accepting condolences like she was the widow, not the estranged daughter. But her eyes kept darting toward the hallway. She had the instincts of a scavenger. She noticed Mark step outside onto the porch to take his call. She noticed the unattended bag. She waited exactly 30 seconds. Then, she smoothed her black dress over her baby bump and waddled toward the bathroom. But she didn't go into the bathroom. She stopped at the hall table. From my vantage point, I saw the greed take over. She glanced left, then right. Her hand snaked into the open zipper. She pulled out the folder. I held my breath. If she looked too closely, she might notice the paper was too fresh. The font slightly too modern for a 20-year-old trust. But greed makes people blind. She flipped it open. I knew exactly what she was seeing. A forged bank statement from a shell company in the Cayman Islands, showing a balance of $850,000. Liquid cash. Untraceable. Tax-free. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. She quickly pulled out her phone, snapped 3 photos of the documents, and shoved the folder back into the bag. She practically ran back to the living room, grabbing Galvin's arm with a ferocity that made him spill his drink. They retreated to the corner of the kitchen. I moved closer, pretending to clear empty glasses from the tables. I needed to hear it. I needed to know the bait had been swallowed. "It's almost $1 million. Galvin," Annie hissed, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "Dad was holding out on us. He had an offshore account. Are you sure?" Galvin wiped sweat from his upper lip. "Does Julia know?" "Of course she doesn't know. She's a history teacher. She thinks offshore means a boat trip. She's too stupid to understand complex assets." Annie pulled up the photo on her phone, zooming in on the balance. "This is it. This is how we fix everything. But the will—" "Forget the will," Annie interrupted. She placed a hand on her stomach, her eyes narrowing. "We use the baby. We tell Julia we'll be generous. We'll let her keep the house and the life insurance. What is it, 150 grand? Peanuts. We tell her we just want the personal effects, and whatever digital files Dad left behind. She'll think she's winning. She'll think she's getting the house for free." "You'd trade the house?" "The house is heavy, Galvin. It's old. It has property taxes. This?" She tapped the screen. "This is cash. We trade the bricks for the gold. We use the baby to guilt her into the deal. I'll tell her the stress of the house is bad for the pregnancy. She's weak. She'll fold." I walked away, carrying a tray of dirty glasses to the sink. The water ran over my hands, cold and cleansing. Annie wasn't just greedy. She was arrogant. She thought she was running a con on me. She thought she was trading a headache for a fortune. She had no idea she was trading a tangible asset for a ghost. Mark walked back inside, zipped up his briefcase, and winked at me. The fish was on the hook. The following morning, we gathered in the library for what Annie called the settlement. She sat at the head of the table, flanked by Galvin and Aunt Mary. They looked like a tribunal of vultures. Mark sat next to me, his laptop open, a stack of documents arranged with geometric precision in front of him. The air wasn't tense, it was electric with greed. Annie's eyes kept darting to the silver USB drive sitting in the center of the table. She thought it was the key to the Cayman account. She thought it was the magic wand that would solve her problems. "Let's make this simple," Annie said, drumming her manicured fingernails on the wood. We want the Cayman assets. All of them. In exchange, we will sign a non-judicial settlement agreement, waiving all claims to the house and the life insurance policy. We walk away clean. You keep the bricks and mortar. Mark adjusted his glasses. Just to be clear, he said, his voice flat and professional. You are trading a confirmed asset, a house appraised at $650,000, and a policy worth $150,000 for the contents of a digital folder you have not verified. Once you sign this NJSA, there is no going back. It is a non-recourse agreement. You cannot sue Julia later if you don't like what you find. Galvin leaned forward, sweat beading on his forehead. We know what's in there. We saw the statement. Stop trying to scare us out of our money. Aunt Mary leaned in, whispering loud enough for me to hear. Sign it, Annie. Let Julia have the old house with the leaky roof and the property taxes. You deserve the cash, honey. You have a baby to think of. Let her play housemaid. I pushed the document toward Annie. It's your choice, I said softly. Annie grabbed the pen. She didn't hesitate. She didn't read the clauses. She scribbled her signature with a flourish, a smile curling her lips that made my stomach turn. She looked up at me, her eyes dancing with triumph. You really are an idiot, Julia, she said, chuckling as she capped the pen. You probably think this secret fund is too much legal trouble, don't you? That's why you're dumping it on me. But let me tell you, Dad hid a treasure that you just don't have the guts to claim. Fine. I'll take the hit and accept this just to make you happy. You just hug that debt-ridden house and scrape by. Just don't come crawling back asking for a cent. She shoved the signed papers back to Mark. Done. Give me the drive. Mark checked the signatures. He tapped a few keys on his laptop, formally filing the agreement with the probate court's electronic system. The timestamp flashed on his screen. It was locked. The house is yours, Julia, Mark said. He picked up the USB drive and slid it across the mahogany table. And the Cayman assets are yours, Annie. Annie snatched the drive. She pulled a laptop from her bag, her hands trembling with anticipation. Galvin crowded behind her, practically drooling. She plugged it in. The folder popped up on the screen. There were no bank codes. There were no transfer protocols. There was just a single video file titled, My Last Will, Supplement, and a PDF document. What is this? Annie muttered. She clicked the video. Dad's face filled the screen. He looked sick, tired. But his eyes were sharp, sharper than they had been in months. He was sitting in this very room, wearing his favorite cardigan. Annie, Dad's voice rasped from the speakers. If you are watching this, it means you fought your sister for more. You traded the home I built for a secret you thought you stole. You were never satisfied. You always wanted the easy way out. Annie froze. Galvin stopped breathing. There is no Cayman trust, Dad continued. I opened that account 20 years ago on a vacation. It has a balance of $10. I left it open just to pay for this USB drive. If you are watching this, you chose greed over family. You chose a lie over a home. So I am leaving you the only thing I have left. The truth. The video cut to black. The room was so silent I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Annie stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. This is a joke, Galvin stammered. There was a statement. We saw the statement. You saw a Photoshop file, Mark said calmly. Social engineering is a powerful tool, Galvin. But, Annie clicked the second file. The PDF. It wasn't financial. It was a medical report. Paternity test results. Subject. Leo. Alleged father. Galvin. 99.9% match. Annie stopped breathing. She looked at the document. Then she slowly turned her head to look at Galvin. Galvin's face went the color of old ash. You have a son? Annie whispered. With who? I can't explain. Galvin squeaked, backing away. And one more thing, I said, sliding a final piece of paper across the table. It was a notice of default. The probate advance company called my lawyer this morning. They heard you signed away your inheritance rights. Since the house was the collateral for that $50,000 loan you took out, Galvin. And since you no longer have any claim to the house, they've triggered the fraud clause. I pointed at the bottom line. They are seizing your car today. And they are garnishing your wages, Annie. Starting Monday. Annie looked at the paper. Then at the empty screen where her millions were supposed to be. Then at the husband who had a secret child and a mountain of debt. She let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream. It was the sound of a world shattering. Annie screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a raw, animal noise of absolute ruin. She lunged across the table, grabbing the signed settlement agreement. She tore it in half, then into quarters, shredding the paper until it was just confetti on the mahogany table. "It's gone!" she shrieked, her face blotchy and wild. "I didn't sign anything. There's no deal." Mark didn't even flinch. He just tapped his laptop screen. "That was just the hard copy, Annie. The digital signature was uploaded to the county clerk's server 3 minutes ago. It's filed. It's public record. You can burn the whole house down. You still don't own it." Galvin didn't wait for the credits to roll. He looked at the debt notice, then at his screaming, bankrupt wife, and then at the door. He muttered something about getting a lawyer and bolted. I watched him run down the driveway, a rat deserting a sinking ship. He wouldn't get far. The probate advance company had already put a lien on his car. "Get out!" Annie yelled at me, clutching her stomach. "Get out of my house!" "It's my house," I said calmly. "And I'm selling it. But you don't have to leave yet. You have visitors." Blue lights flashed through the front window. Not an ambulance. Police. 2 officers stepped into the library. They weren't there for the house dispute. They were there for the bank records Mark had quietly forwarded to the district attorney. "Annie?" the lead officer asked. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding $40,000 in unauthorized wire transfers made from the estate of Jonathan, after your power of attorney was revoked." Annie looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal. You knew? You let me transfer it?" "I let you show who you really are," I said. They let her out in handcuffs. She lost the house. She lost the husband. She lost the money. And now, she was facing felony fraud charges while 6 months pregnant. It was a tragedy. But it was a tragedy she wrote, produced, and starred in. I sold the house a month later. I didn't keep the money. I used the proceeds to start the Jonathan History Scholarship for students who want to document the truth. Mark and I moved 2 cities over. We bought a small place with a garden. No historic woodwork. No legacy. Just peace. I don't visit Annie in prison. I don't look for Galvin. I don't feel guilty. People say you should forgive family to find peace. I disagree. Sometimes peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from justice.